How's tricks, James? Yeah?
So I just bought this and then I can top it.
Yeah, okay. Not been an employee for 3 weeks or something.
How you doing? Are you well? Good. Did you enjoy America? Was it really good? Yeah, good to see you, mate. At least you're back safe. Yeah. Clive was posting loads of photos, wasn't he?
Yeah. So I only saw him a few times. He was dealing with all sorts of crap apparently.
Yeah, was it? Yeah, I don't think I need mine, Josh. I'll just leave mine down there for after the exhibition.
Cool. Sorted. I do need to test if we can actually hear audio.
Should I get another chair in there or just one?
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I need to test if we can get audio on the stream. What? Yeah.
Make sure you're not on the stream of
What do you use to stream? Do you have any special streaming setup or anything?
Just OBS. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a weird icon. It's like a Mercedes box. Yeah. It's good. There's a lot of people actually raving about it.
It works.
That's
I'm using it to stream Nothing special, really.
No, but it's the actual course. Is it like
yeah, but it's still slightly. Supposed to look like it says to Photoshop and then the natural. So do you like it slower or
no, I mean, what I took was so it's the actual.
my father's was bad at production, he's bought so much stuff.
Because you were saying stuck in the right.
Oh yeah. No, he went mad about it. My Oh wow. This and you go, is it like the cartoons? Can't stop it, it's just the way they're not running into balls and like reaching the ball. Well, that's the thing, the two older ones are quite close. Nice, that's a happy,
No, it's really good.
yeah,
Definitely put it on your so that you know all those.
you missed the same time.
Put them on
It's nice to play that aspect.
when you look at them see.
Yeah.
It's what you can.
It's nice, it's nice.
You know what I mean? So you could put under something like rest. But if you just rest, you know, just music. So you just stuff like take notes as well. So you know, like
Right. That's about the best thing about it, the roadside of it. It's used to say.
Right, I think we're going to kick things off now, now that our friend at the back has stumbled into his chair. Yes, so thank you all for coming to the August meetup of LeicesterJS. Thank you for being here. Just a few bits of information. We're a monthly meetup on the third Thursday of every month. If you're first timer here or have never been to a meetup, then we will be here every Thursday, apart from next month because I'm getting married. So, thank you. I'm on honeymoon. But in the meantime, if you have got any queries or questions, then fire an email to meetup@trashgate.com. and I can answer you. If you would also like to speak, because we need speakers for October, then file an issue on GitHub and we can sort that out. And also, since this is a packed out audience tonight, there is a feedback form at that link. If you could go there, it's like literally 4 questions or so. We're trying to improve the meetup constantly, so your feedback would be appreciated. And all the LeicesterJS Twitter and Slack things, come and join us on there, and if you need the Wi-Fi, that's that as well. Food's going to be coming out at 7:30. If you also need the bathrooms or any help with finding anything, come and talk to me or anyone else who works from Cloud Call, like Rich and Tim. And yeah, help yourself to beer as well, or whatever else you want. A little announcement about DDD East Midlands. This is a conference that's happening on the 26th of October. It's a free conference, and it's got a lot of very interesting talks and speakers that are lined up to go and host it. So the organisers reached out to me to try and get some of you guys to submit talk proposals and also to attend as well. So if you're interested in that, go and check out DDD. We're also sponsored obviously by Cloud Call and also Harvey Nash. Cloud Call is the offices you're in right now, and Harvey Nash are a recruitment company, as you probably know, and they pay for all our t-shirts and stickers and things like that. Next time, as I say, we'll be back here in October. Let me know, what would you like next time? Would you like us to do workshops? Would you like us to do more of the cool wall? Roundtable discussions, or just normal standard talks? Let me know, because it helps me to know what you guys actually want to turn up here for and give up your evening. So now, over to our lovely friend Richard Burley to talk about, it's about design development.
The boring.
Take it away.
Cheers. Josh.
Do you need help?
Yeah. What do you do? Just write.
I'll just say,
Start from the slide, don't you? Start from, play from, start.
Yeah.
Hi guys. Right, so just an introduction. I'm Richard. I do design and done a bit of development here at Cloud Call. So just to give you a bit of an intro, I've worked with Josh on some LeicesterJS stuff, like for example the logo. We designed the fox. Took a few iterations, but we got there. Started out as a cat, and then we moved more sort of Leicester themed. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty loath to use a fox because I'm a West Ham fan, and Fox is, you know, Leicester City, all that stuff. So if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter /Richard Burley. Let's move on to the next slide. Right, so I want to give a talk on design versus development. So, coming from a background in both design and development, I've seen sort of both sides to each sort of department, and a lot of problems you get is when you take something from design into development, there's a lot of differences. Mainly the big differences are like developers use component-based stuff. They use reusable components that you can use again and again. So when we have complex UI flows that constantly update, change and react with technical decisions that we make every day, so we need a way of like having flexibility. We need to adapt quickly. So developers have a solution to this called components, right? So engineers often build their applications using these reusable components. Now, these can be pieced together to make sort of more complex UI, but with design, we don't really have this sort of mentality. We've been going on like sort of devices or viewports, and designing to those sort of resolutions or those viewports is not always the best method. So what we've tried to do is mix things up a little bit and start to think more a bit about how developers would approach this problem. So this is where stuff like Figma comes into it. In Figma, you've got sort of a really nice tool that can sort of create your component library. So you've all heard of like design systems that can help you scale your applications. So we take a simple element, let's just say an icon, and we take it right down to its most granular form. So you've got reusable elements like a button, an icon, an input field. You want to make them as easy to sort of replicate and sort of move across your designs as you can. So what we do is we take a simple component and we create as many instances of this component as we like. Now, the icon on the left is your base component, and we drag that 3 instances as you see. Changing component instances. What we can do is we can override these default behaviors, like we can drag the size, we can change the dimensions, the color, and it affects every single instance across all of our applications. Now you think if you've got, let's say, 150, 200 screens, and you want to update that one icon or that one button, you don't have to go and do that 150 times. So something like this is really, really useful. Now this is where the cool bit starts. We've got overriding components. So I've just told you about those instances that you can make, and you can change the shape and the size. But what if you want to change the colour? What if you want to make one individual case for a smaller device or some custom like company, for example, have a different colour logo? We can override these instances, but they're still tied to that base component. Then we get more complex components. So you think like you may have like some sort of messaging system or some sort of calendar. You want to repeat these elements over and over again. That's great, so we can repeat this card like multiple times. It's got all the icons, it's got the headers, but you want to update an individual element of that, going more granular. It updates all of the pieces simultaneously, but you can manipulate and override each one to make different widths, different sizes. Now if you couple this together with other stuff like component constraints, this is where UI gets really powerful. So we've got different device sizes like I was telling you earlier. Now, you want to resize these devices. Instead of designing to these viewports themselves, what if you design a custom element that can work within the constraints of your device? So we're dragging this smaller and larger, and it's just working how something like Flexbox would work. It would expand and contract and be more sort of fluid to the device. Then there's other cool tools that we can do within a tool like Figma. Now Figma is, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's like, we've got a graphic design program like Sketch, but Figma's one more. It's kind of all the best bits of Sketch plus some. Now we can do really cool stuff, like we can collaborate on the same screens. For example, I've got my co-designer. We're working on this one piece. I can work on one piece of UI and they can work on the same page but on a different piece of UI. And as you can see, the cursors here indicate where my colleague is working on. Now this isn't just a, like say, a collaborative tool with designers. This could be me handing over to a developer. I'm showing you how a piece of UI works from a designer's perspective, but you as the developer struggling to use it, I can see where you're clicking, I can see where you're hovering, and this gives us a lot more power when it comes to collaboration and sort of feedback. It really helps with sort of the handover. So multiplayer editing in Figma gives us that. Then we've got stuff like mobile device live preview. Now this is really cool. I mean, I can't exactly show you a live example on my phone, but the best thing I can do is show you this GIF where you've got some designs and you can mirror it to your device. Now there's something called Figma Mirror that allows us to do this. So we start dragging the canvas and you can start to see how that's going to behave on a mobile device. Change the colour, it's updated instantly. Now you think, what does this add, what value does this give us? But you can imagine if you start to prototype some of these screens, add some interactions, some nice little hover states, some drop downs, some scrolling. You think if you start to play with that on your phone, how cool would it be to see how something behaves before you've built it, before you've passed it on to somewhere like design, into development, should we say. So a tool like Figma Mirror allows us to preview stuff on mobile devices, and we can, like I say, prototype and see how it's going to behave. You can do this on iPads, phones, any device you want really. Right, next screen. And this is where it comes to stuff like component libraries. So how do we make this whole process easier? Now with Figma, you can do something like a style system where you have base components and you can put them into your applications, like I say. But how do we break that down? So there's this methodology called atomic design where you might have, like I say earlier, where you've got your component, which is just like a card. You've got an avatar, some text lines, some subtext. You need to break that down into the really small bits. So like we've just got text, right? We've just got an image, we've just got a colour. And then them three layer over each other to make a button. But then what happens when you have multiple buttons, or you have multiple buttons inside a layout? And this is how we break our components down. So we've got atoms, which is the smallest element, buttons, your drop downs. You've got molecules, which is like your collection of this stuff, like your toasters, your pop-ups, your modals, all that sort of stuff. And then we have organisms, which is like page sections made from a combination of all these above. So you could have atoms and molecules combined together to make these organisms. And then we can start to get more power with that by putting them into something like templates. Unassuming of content, you've got templates you can use over and over again. And then, again, adding the content in, you've got pages, which is more like this stuff that you see on the right. So it's a very similar kind of approach that you probably do in something like React or Angular, where you componentize everything and you sort of reuse that component over and over. You'd use templates, you'd use components, and it's just breaking design down into a similar sort of mindset. Figma meets React. Now, this is something that's quite new. I've not had the most time to get used to stuff like this yet, but I've worked in React a couple of years ago, and I've worked in Angular a lot recently. Now, what Figma does is it allows you to sort of go head to head with stuff like React and Angular and interact with code and designs together. This is where you can update a design in Figma and sync the changes to your application with one click. It doesn't override your base code. It's just like a sort of very generic sort of like functional Figma code, if you like, pseudocode. It's separated from your proper code in the development sort of compartment. And then Figma allows us to add functional code to our designs and can use real data to populate these designs as well. For example, in this example here, you've got the design, we're putting it into an application here. and you're adding like some JSON data to it, and it's populating into this form, and we're scaling it and changing the design, and it's updating in the application, which is React. So anything we can do in design can be mapped to something like React, basically, like a component, a colour, a drop down, anything like that can be mapped over, and you can see live examples of that. Figma to CSS, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's still pretty powerful. Most design tools have a concept of constraints, which is like snapping to the left and to the right when you drag it and make it very fluid. You know you have that in design, right? In development, right? With your flexbox, your grid, all that sort of stuff. But the cool thing with constraints is you can pin it to the left and right into the top, and it does this fluid layout. Now you think, how can I do that in development? But this is where the Figma API comes in. It's already got a strategy for mapping these constraints over into the HTML, so we can resize these nodes dynamically. UI design can benefit from having these concepts shared rather than design and development trying to imitate each other. So by having this same sort of principle in development, it'll make our lives a lot easier. And like I say at the bottom there, Flexbox could probably do all of this, but there are some more added benefits to doing it this way. So really, that's in a nutshell most of the talk. But if you have any questions about Figma and stuff, I'll be happy to answer. Yes?
You spoke a little bit about how the handover process was done. Is it kind of your opinion that it would be developers coming over to the design side, or is it kind of like vice versa? And so in the ideal world, from beginning to end, what is your handover process? What's your ideal?
Ideal handover process. Right, so in an ideal world, I mean, tell me if anyone disagrees, but you'd have product feeding design and development, right? In sort of harmony. You'd have your designs, you know, you've got a sort of to and fro with the ideas, the processes. Products would feed into design would hand over to development. But what you're saying is you want, what was the question there? So
just particularly where you design a handoff to,
yeah, to the developer. Yeah.
What are you handing off? What do you expect the developer to know?
Oh, what, from the design perspective? We just want to make that handover a lot easier. So, I mean, before we would have like a load of screens maybe in InVision. It's just like a library of a load of screens. A developer comes along and sees a load of screens. They're not always aware of what's usable and what's not, right? They can get a little bit lost with that. So with tools like Figma, we want to make that handover a little bit easier. And I guess we want to, before we jump straight into development, sort of prototype and sort of see how a design can behave before we commit to the development of it. See how it's going to interact with users, get a handle on it first. That sort of idea, really. Any other questions, Phil?
Yeah. So the question I have is, obviously, this is quite low-level design, I would
Yeah.
say. So basically, you actually may limit your design to what you could easily design in Figma.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, at what point do you have, what points in the process before this
Yes.
do you actually start thinking about, so because this is about analysis, breaking down into
Yeah.
components, the whole thing you just said there is
Yeah,
breaking down
reusable
components.
components.
So
Yeah.
systems thinking is more the fact that you're basically thinking about how the thing works with its environment,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily quite how you designed it.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of get to that stage where you are thinking about its purpose and function,
Beyond
how
the
it relates within
beyond the
thing,
components.
before you ever jump into this, because the temptation I would imagine is
Yeah.
to jump in to try and express your ideas using Figma,
Yeah.
and you get to the point where you may not be able to
Yeah.
get that idea of its purpose, its function,
Yeah.
into Figma without them saying, well, this is how we do it in Figma.
Yeah.
So do you actually do you go through a different process before you get to Figma, or do you? I'm just trying to-
Yeah, so you're going to like sort of do your brainstorming, your wireframes, your mock-ups, all that sort of stuff before it goes there. What you're saying is there's a collaborative process before that.
Yes.
But before you go into Figma,
Yes.
you're worrying that we're
Jumping into low-level design,
Yeah.
which is almost like programming. Obviously,
Yeah.
what can I express in React
yeah,
is obviously a limitation of design.
yeah,
I'm just wondering what it is you do to try and stop that that process? Is there some sort of process you go through where you, because obviously you would also need to communicate that behaviour also to the programmer, not just the low-level design.
Yeah, we're trying to get away as much of our ideas out to the developer as possible. So we're trying to. Sometimes you can't always get that from the screens. We're trying to show our thinking, our decisions behind the UX decisions, right? So how something's going to behave, how we expect it to.
What's the task?
Yeah, what's the task above it? So you're saying come away from that more like sort of from a product level, what's required from the task?
Because I want my design, if you like, to be thinking about that rather than necessarily exactly how it's laid out on the screen, even though it's part of design.
Yeah, you think I'm leaning more towards the development rather. From the planning. No, it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think if you've done a lot of planning up front with your product department and you've got a lot of twos and fro's with the, like I say, the mock-ups and the wireframings, and you've gone through that sketchy stage and you've started to map stuff out, I think I'm not too concerned about it going more towards development, as long as you don't let them pull you towards their way of like coding, if you like, or they want to do it their way. You don't let them pull you towards their concepts. I'm using sort of developer concepts, if that makes sense, to make my life easier in building the designs, not so much driving what the design's about. It's just making my life easier for reusing components to make my workflow quicker, the process quicker of getting these designs out. It's not so much about what it's about.
Right, so is there a rough version of that? So basically you're not necessarily communicating the fact that this is pixel perfect design I'm translating to you. Is the sort of like the rough line equivalent of it saying this is what I'm trying to sketch out? Yes, I've got these techniques, enable me to basically do the constraints based the overrides and class based sort of interfaces.
It's probably a very sort of fancy new on the block design tool, if you like, and we'll probably get a little bit excited, and I'm sure there's going to be limitations down the line, don't get me wrong.
So it sounds a great tool.
Great tool.
I'm just concerned at the fact that jumping on it and getting very enthusiastic about it cause a certain...
Yeah, you can oversee some key details, I get you, Okay. Any question?
Because it's so close to like the developer, actually being able to synchronize changes, let's say when the React component actually was in the production, some iterations, let's say you had load a button that didn't load and said you'd kind of forgotten about because it wasn't in the original brief.
So like a reverse syncing.
Right, I was just thinking if the development adds it, because obviously there's bits and pieces like the added next to the real more stuff. Is there a way to synchronize that back to Figma or?
Yeah,
so my experience, we've always had trouble with like static markup, and then let's say like the skeleton view is needed before the data loads and stuff.
Yeah, and you want to know.
Out of sync then,
You want to know if it syncs back. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going into the real depths of this stuff yet because this is more handover. But I believe it can do reverse syncing that way as well. Yes.
Right.
Yes, because I'm sure I read up on an article and it can do reverse syncing.
Yeah. I just wondered the greater problem of that if you ever run into. Like how do you keep your design system up to date with the actual like React component?
So for example, right now we're just implementing a design system here, and this is why it's led us to this talk really. So we've gone from the level of we've got a lot of UI, and how do we turn that into sort of reusable stuff, right? How do we document this UI? So we've tried to break all of our UI down into really basic components. But again, what you're saying is if you tie that heavily to the design, to the development components, you're worried about that. Becoming a bit complex.
It's not the complexity; it's just it's a problem I've always had to solve.
Like
where designers sort of feel disconnected from the development because what you end up building is actually going to be quite different.
I don't think this will be your final software solution in development. It's more of a kind of a halfway house in between design and development here. It's kind of sitting in the middle. It gives you an idea of how it could look if it's developed, and just how it's going to behave before you fully commit to the final solution.
Right.
A bit of a kind of a POC in a way.
Right.
A really lightweight POC.
So it's not aiming at with Framework X, for example. They've tried to do the whole thing. They build React stuff. Actually, more toward Webflow, I'd say.
Yeah.
They're trying to build the actual end-to-end.
I think that could come down the line, but that gets quite complex.
Yeah, and you need to be able to buy in from everybody to say this.
It's going to need a lot of buy-in from a lot of teams, and to keep it up to date and in harmony, it's going to take a lot of effort.
To do the update, because obviously what you want is as built, so you can then say this is where we want to move from here to there, rather than the old design, which wasn't actually what we were really looking and trying to do. Communicate that.
This is more putting your designs through its paces in a way. For example, we could just do all lorem ipsum in our designs, right? And it not quite work out when we have live data. So it's just a kind of a halfway house so we can load in a bit of real data and see how our designs stand up to that. And it's
so
kind
you
of,
think it's an evolution of, say, the craft plugin for Vision, sort of, and trying to do, let's say, real images from Unsplash or something. Yeah. You see this as an evolution.
Just moving it a bit closer to the development, but I still think it's got a long way to go. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's a big move towards that.
Do you have automation tools built in so you could actually then, for instance, get data in dynamically to actually basically, to actually say, okay, I want it to look at this example set of data now, so I can then force that?
I believe so, because the React side of it allows you to be quite flexible with that, and I think it does. I mean, I can't say 100% categorically, because like I said, it gets a little bit more techy than I'm used to, but I'm pretty sure it does.
You can automate.
Yeah.
So then you can actually put scenarios through. As the scenarios change, you can then update.
And it's quite a powerful thing, that.
It seems like you'd actually have a flag as well to know whether there's in Figma mode.
Yeah. What I might do is start to put it through its paces with a bit of front end, and maybe do another talk another time,
maybe like
leading into more
workshop idea or something.
Yeah, it might be worth reading up on that.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Actually, it's not a question, it's just a comment about this putting design closer to development.
Yeah.
Figma literally a week ago announced a plugin system, and the plugins are just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so we are all able to build the plugins for Figma right now.
Fantastic.
And literally you can pull data from your JSON file straight to your Figma design. So for example, you can create an article component, duplicate that multiple times, and then connect it to your JSON data layer, and it populates your components with a data presentation.
And swap and change the data.
And tons of cool other plugins already. Despite the fact that they announced it literally with a...
It's still up and coming, like I say, it's an up and coming tool. It's only been on the block 2 or 3 years, I think it has. The API is just getting bigger and bigger, but it's just, it's a tool that's got us excited, but like I say, I'm sure we'll have its limitations.
But it's interesting because Sketch have just announced their beta is going online.
What's this, sorry?
It's the Sketch actually there. Version is coming out soon as well.
Like I say, it's very similar to Sketch, but Sketch is very much like a graphic design, vector, bitmap tool, but with Figma, it's kind of everything that Sketch has got, but it adds the component library on top, managing your components.
Yes. One thing about Sketch's designing systems that the design tokens it uses is very awkward.
Sharing your screens, collaboration, multiplayer editing, version history of all your designs, and you can like tag that with releases to like a developer's release. Or let's just say you want to do some designs for a developer and you don't want to expose all of those features. You can sort of turn features off, like in Figma and stuff like that.
Can you still rename it, going final, but definitely final?
final. Dot Figma. Yeah, that's the one. So that's my talk, guys, and hope I didn't bore you with the design stuff. Okay.
We're still waiting on our lovely friends at Pizza Hut / Domino's, so just sort of talk amongst yourselves.
Polyfilator.
Yeah. Talk amongst yourselves, chat, discuss, and pizza will be here shortly. Cool. Yeah, thank you very much.
I found it harder because I had to keep turning around so I could read what my slide said rather than have it in front of me. It's cool.
I always thought we got that's even food is here. Go eat. Cheers, man. Thank you. Tim, did they give you a receipt? Yeah. Put on chance there. Sweet, thanks. Cheers, mate. Thank you. So, there is a Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, so like it depends on like the boss that you follow, isn't it? As well, because it's all because it's from the movie.
Having it on the screen.
From?
I am, yeah.
And then reading it.
Close enough. 5 minutes on the train.
That's in the Leicester.
Yeah.
Mate, you've overflowed. I know, mate, honestly.
Don't know what's going on.
It's ridiculous.
Same split pizza, wasn't it?
Well, you
For your old friend Josh.
this is literally my dinner today. I don't get anything else when I go home. Girlfriend's cooked for herself. I'm out on my ears.
How's things going, man?
Tired. Like, just permanently tired. That's it.
That's the London journey.
Yeah. Cat's right?
Yes. Just a crap load to do. Just a cat load to do.
Hey.
Stop posting. Yeah, sit down. You leave him. That's where he is.
And then I get second question. Sweet. No,
I'm going to look at my giant head for a while.
Looking forward to it.
Say again?
You looking forward to it?
Have you given a talk before?
I haven't, no.
You haven't? No, it's fine. I'm not sure. You did a podcast.
I've done the podcast, but I sit in a room with a microphone in front of me and there's nobody there, so...
Yeah, the old advice. Tell me all naked.
I don't know if that's going to help anything. That might be...
Like shield his eyes in the corner. Like, oh!
Stood there presenting like this.
Maybe that's what I should do. Just cover my eyes. It's just a microphone.
Awesome. Right, I'm gonna grab some food. If there's any left.
Oh no, the stream's got me. That's all it is. Where's my business card?
I put mine in the stream. Hey, how you doing?
Explaining your train of thought, how it's used, how to interact with that.
Yes, we have
Profile shot.
Yep, pretty much.
Early conversations and collaboration. So we know it's really powerful.
Yeah, I know. If it was me making a decision, it would have been I think we are taking this, we're missing a trick because we are embarking on which using it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years, which I don't think is going to work, and they're going to learn what about it.
So I'm just trying to, I guess,
so to then reach out, that's what I mean, and I think in order to then do that and not go into events, ultimately give it because this she's moved it out. I think it'll be a month to maybe more from there until we have to start using edges again. And then keep it because we're based on it, we'll shut the edges down. and then we do this.
It's design and the
it's going to fail because there isn't enough diversity. There's not enough and they don't want to see. So when that happens, I'm going to let it. Then we're going to bring the agency back on, and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with agencies, and it's going to give us a bit more of a thought of what we're doing. What I will say is that we need to look at
even if it is. There's a difference between going out to the CSS and the or going, I'll be okay, have a conversation, we'll look for it, start with what was there, we've got an event.
You know what I mean? Getting people we're not branding ourselves as an event yet. You know what I mean? We're not setting the tone. We are learning how it works, what works best. And we can do it. As I say, it's not me that's making the decision.
You've got to let things carry out the way they're going to carry out at the end of the day. Let that happen, then you can come up with solutions. People like ideas and what they want to do. That's the thing, isn't it? You just got to behind the idea of what.
Well, it wouldn't, because I wouldn't let it. You know, there's no way I'd let it.
Same as me, I'd buy people keep people if you want to get more into regardless of what it is.
Even if imagine how different you can make it look better than it is.
Make it look bigger. The angles you can take pictures on, do whatnot, that makes it look bigger. Yeah, it'll work out. You just got to take your time to do it.
Yeah. It's new, and it's not me that's driving it. Where, like, when I was a bar, I'd say, right, we'll do this. Then this and we'll do this. I can't do that. I've got no access to it. No access to it.
Yeah, it's a bigger thing, isn't it? Well, once you get into it, it's once you've got into that, you've done a bit, you've got the reputation for delivering. It's a bit like that. It's more time in the room with certain things, isn't it? Rather than going, let's do this, and this. It's going, right, that's happening, I've got a better idea. And then, let's do that.
Management sharing, history improve because back in time, been living there 5 years, you know what I mean? It's different. So it's just to get it where I want to get it, it's just going to take time. Even if it's 2, 3, 6,
That's the thing, it's a long burn, isn't it? As long as it works the right way. Don't grab a slice of pizza. So I'm going to have a little move around.
They don't think about this. Then if they want to do it themselves, they can just pass them the colour variable.
That's what happens. Yeah, that's it. The synchronize for changes. That's what the design system is.
It goes as far as to say like we're trying to go really complex bit of like layout and stretching sticking to the left. Even starting to do the pseudo code in the CSS and everything, and leaving these records to there, so it gives you an indication of space in between, or growing columns, all that sort of stuff. So it starts to help you prompt you if you're not quite sure what you're doing. So really, each pretenders might have their own ideas on how to do that. They might not want to follow that pseudocode.
I think, yeah, we've touched on it a couple of times. The inference that it's there sometimes. I think it's how you. I'm not so sure that.
Some people might be very fancy about it, but we don't know. I think it's
It's got both options, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think if Ryan said something, I'm
not sure how to
I don't think it will replace it. It's really nice if it does something like it's not very, I think it's more about language.
Mate, I'm sure it's always marry up just perfect. I appreciate that. I think that's what we're trying to say, wasn't it?
Well, I think it's anything that's going from very macro level, implementing as it not the top of design. Everybody that's going to this kind of visual language, that's important.
That's something that I'm probably not so on by, and that's why I'm sure that's that question. But how it's
everyone knows it's it's all these things.
I think we've a lot of development projects, it's all the new kid on the block. It seems all like the same, and that's got really different cases and lots of different scenarios. Standing up in terms of our company, because what we're doing is and there are a lot of designs to the developers, and they're doing like regular releases of and screens. So we're sort of topping off the latest features, giving them designs, say V2, give them their designs. We've got the full set of features that we're and eventually, and it's stacking up on what we're trying to do.
Can you marry that up to like features?
What we want to be, we're not there yet, but we want
lots of companies, it's like it's very easy to come through very simple. What they have is like you can actually map out a release and take a meeting along.
Oh really?
And one customer they have all this stuff.
Oh that's nice.
But I just implement something very simple for now.
Yeah.
You can help with V3, let's say it's tune up next. You don't necessarily have to worry about what's what. It's just
when I came in here, there was no design, so there was a lot of GUI, but there was no documentation of the GUI. There was no consistency, no sort of brand for the whole product set. So we thought we need to really sort of stop documenting this GUI and sort of saying, if we have a problem, that's how it works. It's this order. We've got cancel on the left and save on the right, save on the left and or we've got search to go into that search and it's confusing.
what's your name?
Yeah, 50 Shades of Pepper. Exactly that.
It's just always the way though, because everyone just decides a little bit differently. Some people have more vision for eyes, some care a bit more, others just want to work on it. You know, you hit the feature and think it's a bit more.
We have so many developers that
picks up on it.
No one's picking up on the vision.
Right, and that's one criteria also. I have more developers, but we still
sure.
They want to be, I know it's small, little minutiae, what is one?
I know it's really pedantic.
It can be, but it's
the difference between professional and minimal.
But it's so much better. I even said this year, you notice things more.
Yeah. I said to one developer that really just couldn't get away with it. I said, alright, you've spent years building this kicking from scratch. You've made the brakes, you've filed everything down, you've made everything. But then it gets to the end and you make this beautiful car. And you just want to stick a chassis on it with dents in it. Or do you want to stick a nice chassis on it? I want a nice chassis. That's all I'm trying to do here is stick a nice.
Yeah, you are definitely right. Like, you can actually put a padding. You know, it looks fine to me.
It's fine, it's the same. No, it's not. It's not. It's not a different style. It's not consistent. And it's like saying, oh, we can leave it here in this one instance. You let it go 40 times, and you've got a massive mismatch. But it's not just that, it's usability as well. Right. People go, I've learned this search, I've learned this.
Wikipedia famously they put the first time on when you go to the search. Last week they put up top right. Some of the guys are doing stuff. So put back to the lab and start using the site. So some of this there in there. But actually when we're going to use it, we learn really get things actually really important. Even if we know for a fact that that's brilliant.
Wrap everyone else in.
Yours is on there, right? Or is that mine? Oh, you got your own laptop?
I've got mine.
Yeah, sweet.
Say something. Yeah, so there's great use of
yeah, okay, yeah. That's a little. Yeah. So I'm understanding.
So actually the bridges.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why
How's your
Yeah, still the thing is, right, because it's just talked on.
Yeah.
This is sort of small things.
Yeah, so what's the thing, doesn't it? What's the bridge though, doesn't it? That's the thing.
it's got to go through this whole process of
It's hard to get everyone to put jokes. I think we just kind of block this door.
It's the opposite.
I'm good to go. Thank you very much.
Right, okay, so we'll start the next talk now, which is by the very good Joshua Graham, who hosts the Getting Apps Done podcast. If you've ever listened to it, you'll know Josh is a very expertise on all things development, so I'll let him take it away.
We'll see about that. I think we may need a pry bar to get everybody out of here when we're done, though. It's a little bit more packed than I thought it would be. Josh asked if anybody wanted to do a talk, and I thought, oh, that looks like a fairly small group. That'd be a good first talk. And he says, there's going to be 54 people there. Okay, that's not quite what I had in mind. Clearly, even looking at my head, so it's me talking. We'll get rid of me, because I don't like to look at me either. But if you're going to listen to me for a little while, you probably should know a little bit about why you should listen to me at first. I got my first computer in 1995. I was introduced to Visual Basic by a friend, and pretty much immediately decided programming was what I wanted to do. And I've been doing it ever since, a little bit on and off, but mostly, yeah, pretty much since then. So almost 25 years now. I currently work as a consultant. I run a lot of development teams for a lot of different companies. We have a variety, everything from stock exchanges to small startups. And obviously, as John said, I host a podcast. I've been doing that for about a year, trying to help developers grow. So I think there are a lot of technical resources out to help people learn code, to learn how to build loops and bubble sorts and all sorts of things like that, but not enough about all the other things that you need to know as a developer. And a lot of these things also relate to what you need to be learning or to know as a human in general. I would like to think of myself as a rockstar developer, but we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what a developer should be and what we are and how we judge each other and ourselves, probably more ourselves than anybody else, that I think are really wrong and are hurtful to us, and they don't make us better developers at all. Also, for the record, I am American, not Canadian. I don't think that actually gives any extra reason for you to listen to me, but just to save confusion. So certainly, when I started my career, I had this idea that there were going to be these gurus out there that knew everything about software development, and I would learn everything I needed to know from them because they've got all the answers. They know absolutely everything. They don't ever get anything wrong. And they can go out there and build apps all by themselves and do all these wonderful things, and that's why they make the big bucks, and that's what I wanted to be. And there's this misconception that developers, the really good ones, are spending all their days, all their nights, every waking moment thinking about development, working with new technologies, playing around with them, not doing anything else. In fact, when I got here, somebody asked me, do you have any time for any other hobbies outside of development? I said, well, yes, absolutely. I make time to go do photography. I go cycle. I play with my kids because I think that's really important. But that's not what the picture or the image of this traditional rockstar developer is. And also, quite often accused of not playing well with others. And again, that was something that I kind of thought was true. In fact, I will actually say that when I started my career, a lot of the developers that I met, they were either Unix developers or mainframe developers, and they didn't always play well with others. And I just, okay, that's the way it is. But I think there's a lot of things wrong with that. And throughout my career, I have built a lot of software. I have caused a lot of machines to have null references, to run into infinite loops, to blue screen, to crash. I've taken out entire server rooms in the past. And I don't tell you these things because I want you to think I'm a bad developer. I want you to know that actually that's normal. I have also built a lot of software that has been in play for more than 10 years. I've built a lot of software that's been used by thousands and thousands of people and stood the test of time. That's all just part of the process. I think that's something that we miss. We get this idea that failure is bad. And it's easy to do because it's very easy to relate failing to failure, being a failure. And we forget that actually failure is normal. Every single person in this room has failed over and over and over again. That's just, it's the way it goes. We can't get away without failing. And it's really easy to forget that because we all kind of have rose-tinted glasses. We forget our failures. We might remember the lessons that we learned from those, but remember, don't ever do that again. You took out a server room, Josh. Don't do it again. But you forget what you did to do that in the first place. So I think to start with, it's really important to just know that it is okay to fail. You can still be a rockstar developer. You can be a huge asset to your company. And be open to the fact that you're going to fail. I think we all need to kind of keep that in mind, because we don't know all the answers. I think, in fact, when I'm hiring a new developer, the first thing I try to find is not that they know all the answers. I don't usually ask them any questions that they have to give me a direct answer to. I ask them to work with me and to learn with me about something that they don't necessarily know. So I think it's much more important that you can find the answers, that you're willing to learn and look and seek, because, let's face it, even if you do know every single answer today, you won't in a year. That's the way tech is. I think we can do that by allowing for failure and failing quickly if we can. Try to push the boundaries a little bit and increment ourselves just a little bit at a time and push ourselves. There's this concept of progressive overload. It's very popular with weightlifting. But I think it works in everything in life, particularly in development, pushing yourself that much further. I remember when I was younger, I played a lot of video games, and the best way to level up was to go fight the bad guys you weren't supposed to be fighting yet, because you got a lot more experience for it. It's the same with this. If you push a little bit harder than your comfort zone, get outside of that, and open yourself to maybe bombing on this one, but learning from it, seeking that feedback from other people, finding out, okay, I really screwed this up. What can I do better next time? And picking up and moving on from that. That's really what we're looking to do here. The problem is, it's very easy to say all those things, but actually it's very hard to admit to failure. Because in general, most of us, we have a reason to want to avoid that. We're scared because, let's face it, I've got kids, I've got to feed them, I've got a mortgage to pay. So I'll go into an interview and they're asking me questions I don't want to admit, I don't know that, or I've bombed that, or I've screwed that up, because I can't do that safely. I think one of the best things we can do for ourselves is put ourselves in a position, clearly, obviously, companies should be allowing for this, but we can't change what every company in the world is doing. But if we can, start to do things, and it is very hard to do, it's very easy to say, but hard to do. Put yourself in a good position of financial safety. Pay off any debts you can. Build up a little bit of money, even if it's just to cover your next month. The amount of freedom you get to say, actually, you know what? If I screw this up, it's probably going to be okay. It's just amazing. It doesn't take a lot to get yourself in a position where you feel a little bit more okay about saying, yeah, I can take a little bit of a risk here. And as I said, you've got to push yourself a little bit outside of those comfort zones and take a few risks here and there. And the more comfortable you are with that, the more you're able to do that. And I think another thing that you can do, and this was one of the lessons that I learned early on, is have a backup plan. I had a manager who was absolutely awesome. He allowed me to go push my boundaries, and when I did screw things up and took out server rooms and all sorts of other things, he would show up right there and say, okay, so what are you going to go do to fix this? I'm going to go get rid of everybody, so I'll leave you alone and let you do that. And at the time, I didn't recognize how important that was. But that was one of the steps in my career that allowed me to understand, okay, so first off, failure is normal. And second, actually, I'm going to learn something from this. I'm going to figure out how to fix this. And it didn't take long before I was coming back to him the moment something went wrong, saying, hey, Dave, I screwed up. This is what I'm going to go do. Is that okay? And he'd say, yeah, go for it. Get it done. And I think having that lesson, learning how to create a backup plan, to then not hide from it. Don't brush it under the carpet or blame somebody else, but to actually just say, yeah, I did this. It helped me. I think it's a very good way to begin to be a bit more transparent, to begin to be a little bit more open, because most of us are hiding a lot of stuff. Just the act of not hiding it, about telling other people, actually leads to supporting other people. Just by saying, you know what, I screwed this up, it makes it okay for somebody else to say, I screwed something up too. The next time something comes up and they screw something up, they're much more likely to say, yes, actually, I did this. How do we get out of this? What do we do now? What's the next step? So, when I'm thinking about rockstar developers, I have stopped thinking about the ones who just automatically have the answers, that kind of 1990s era persona of being hacker or developer who just knew everything, you got called in, fixed everything for everybody. But just start thinking about people who are willing to take a few risks, but not unsafely, to push themselves and learn more, work with others, communicate with others, help others, and push others forward as well. That's the sort of rockstar developer I would like myself to be, whether I'm there or not, I am fairly certain I'm not, but that's what I'm pushing toward. And I think a lot of other developers should be doing the same. Not just pushing yourself, but pushing all of us forward by being more open, being more transparent, and sharing a lot more. And probably screwing a few more things up. And that's about it. You've got my lovely head again. Any questions? I bombed that bad that I... okay, we got one. All right.
What was your biggest screw up?
What was my biggest screw up? I was working for an automotive company in the US. We decided to deploy something that I hadn't tested well enough. We took out 34 servers in about 10 seconds. It took us about 34 hours to get them all back up again. We lost 4 hard drives and about, probably, I'd say $10,000 worth of equipment, and I can't even count how many man hours we spent fixing my screw up. It was pretty big. I never did that again. Yeah.
I was going to say, it seems like you've really good with advice and like sort of skills to like build your career and stuff like that. Have you ever known anyone who kind of suffered with something like imposter syndrome? I mean, I went to a conference recently in England, and apparently you hear that big companies like Facebook for doing all suffer with this.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, before I came here, I was terrified, thinking, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to think, this guy's an idiot. Why are we listening to him? It's very real, and particularly in tech, because there's so much to know. We tend to focus on all those things that we don't know that other people do, instead of thinking about, okay, well, this is something I know, this is something I've experienced, this is what I've done, that's what I am, and just being happy with that. But you're absolutely right. I've seen that all over the place. People come to me all the time and say, what do you do about this? And it's a very tough question to answer, given I haven't solved it for myself either. But I think just by focusing on the things that you are good at and understanding that everybody's in the same situation, it helps a lot. Yeah.
So what was the transition of your employment history? Did you start as an employee, you become a contractor, did you start in your business? What's that sort of progression in your sort of
Okay. Yeah, I started out in pretty big companies. I started working for IBM when I was about 18, and then transitioned into a lot of Fortune 100 companies in the States. I came over here and I worked for 3M for a while, and at some stage I decided that the corporate world just wasn't, there's something wrong, and I didn't at the time quite understand what it was, and a lot of this stuff is what I realized later on. It was a very toxic environment. So I now work for a small company. There are only about 5 of us in the company. We all work fully remote. Our primary concern is that we take care of our families first. And that was one of the first things that made me realize, actually, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't always have to be trying to hide from some corporate exec who wants to fire us because we screwed something up. We can actually just be human beings and do some good work. Yes?
You talked about constantly seeking feedback. How
Yes.
do you decide who to go to for that feedback, and how do you sort of get honest feedback, I suppose is the question.
The second one is a harder one. The first one, I would say anybody you can find. I try to get as much feedback as I can about anything. I will ask my wife, I'll ask my kids, I'll ask the neighbor who's 83, I'll ask anybody I can, even if they don't have any context involved, because you start to get different points of views. And some of those might not be all that useful, some of them might be extremely intelligent and well thought out, and things that you never would have considered because you don't have the perspective of an 83-year-old man. So go find feedback from anybody, but then getting honest feedback, that is much, much harder. I think people hate getting feedback from me because I like to be absolutely brutally honest. If I think something's wrong with it, I will absolutely tell you everything I think is wrong with it, because I hate it when people come to me and say, oh yeah, that looks nice. What I like to do instead, though, is I ask them very specific questions about how they feel about things. So I won't just ask them, does this look good? I'll ask them about components of it. Okay, so when you used this, how long did it take you to get through this bit? Or when you used this, did you feel like you were going to use it again? But then giving them very specific things, because most people, it's not that they don't want to give the feedback, it's that they don't know what feedback to give. They don't know how to answer the question, so they just say, yeah, it was okay.
The question should be concrete in the past, not
Yes.
abstract in the future.
Absolutely. That is spot on.
Also a problem with rationalization as well, that you don't get it too far off the back.
Absolutely, yes. Sometimes they start coming back with feedback that's just completely irrelevant to what you're trying to figure out. So if you focus them in, you ask specific questions about what you need to understand. And it's okay to ask some open questions because sometimes they come up with something that was off target but you never thought about. But you have to mix it up. You really need to focus them in on the things that you need to know.
Just want to hold on from that. So I'm sure you've had it a few cases. This is a question I've got that on some project. But you've got someone new on the team, maybe it's a new manager, and they come in and say, oh, like SQL Server, we should use a Windows service for the. I said, rubbish, we need to use this new trendy thing, something that you've probably never heard of, so you can't provide some feedback on it.
Unfortunately, this happens a lot in the corporate world. You get a takeover and somebody comes in, or somebody got fired, took their golden parachute, and you get somebody new. One of the first things you need to do is set some expectations with them, because they're coming in with a completely different context. They were probably working with another team that did use whatever this new fancy thing is, and you need to make it clear to them, okay, we're happy to look into that, but here are the limitations. This is where we are now. These are the steps we need to take to get to what you're talking about. And just make it very clear to them, this is what you're asking for, because sometimes they don't realize, particularly if they're not technical themselves, they don't necessarily realize that asking you to completely change out your entire database backend is a big deal. They just think, oh, you just swap one for the other. It's no big deal. So if you set those expectations early on, it starts to build up a picture. You can even, I like to do numbers for them. I give them a monetary value to what they're asking for. Okay, do you love that so much that you're willing to pay £500,000 for that?
And the reputational hookup that you could cause by swapping out.
Absolutely. The moment you put a $ on there, people start to understand.
I think it's worse though if you're the other person suggesting technology, another person doesn't know what it is but pretends to do. That can get really toxic and weird.
It's the same sort of thing. If you're in an environment where you don't feel safe to challenge things, to say, just to say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Can you please explain that to me? Because then, yes, you end up with people. I have had employees who had come from different places, and they immediately start telling me, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. And then they take off, and I start thinking, do they really know what they're talking about? And you have to explain to them, if you don't know what that is, just tell me, we'll sort it out, okay? But otherwise, if you let them run, then yes, you end up with huge things. I've seen this in action in large corporations where a lot of money has been spent because people just didn't know what they were talking about, but said yes anyway.
An idea about models about professional risks and not afraid to fail. Do you have like a sort of ratio of risk and safety that you use so that the investments are 8% let's say and 30% aggregate risk? If you quantify in that way here?
I think you possibly could, but I think it's really a very personal thing. Everybody has their own threshold for risk, particularly when you're talking about something that is personal, because doing something at work that has a risk is a work risk. If it risks your job as well, that's a very personal risk. I will have a much higher threshold for doing things at work that might go wrong than I will have if it's something that might potentially mean that I have to sell my kids. Yeah, we have to sell our house, sorry. So the ratios are a little bit skewed when you start to add in emotional and personal impact. But again, the ratios start to change a lot when you do start to I always keep enough money in the bank that I know that my kids are safe for 6 months. That allows me at any stage to say, you know what, actually, if I really screw this up, I think this is absolutely right, but if it goes completely pear-shaped, I'll be okay. And it makes my ratio for risk much higher than somebody else, or even myself. 15 years ago, I didn't have that. If the paycheck was 2 days late, I was asking, well, where's the paycheck? I need to pay bills. And at that stage, I wouldn't have taken any risk. I just paid as much as I could because I had to.
So unless you've got that funding,
yeah.
You 100% safe.
Or even, you would be amazed how much just 1 month of bills paid in the bank will allow you to feel a little bit more comfortable with everything. I think there was another question back there.
Do you think it's possible to change that feature from the bottom up in a corporate environment?
I think it is. I think it's a long, long road. I think some headway has been made. I think it is much better now than it was when I started. The startup culture has changed a lot of that. Companies like Cloud Call here are much more open. In fact, I took an interview with Cloud Call at one stage, and it was one of the most impressive interviews I've taken recently. I think things have changed a lot, but I think we are still moving toward that. But I do think that as developers, if we can start to be a little bit more open, at least with each other, to tell your fellow developer, I don't know what that is, could you help me with that? To help other people, to be a mentor or a mentee, to just start to open some of these doors between us, that'll help us push things further up the chain. Because when it comes down to it, application development companies need us. If we're not working together, they can do whatever the hell they want. We're just fighting against each other.
To add to that, in the corporate world, I started working at Boots earlier this year, and I think that, so I've come in as quite a senior person as an engineering manager, and I think that the culture within Boots is quite a non-changing place where we've had people set in our ways for a lot of years, but they've brought in very high-level top management that have ideas about how they want change, and what they've started to do is to then change the lower regions of the organisation, and that's allowing the lower region to start to create change in the middle layer between the top and the bottom. I think to go to the question of can you change the corporate world, I think if the senior management buy in and you buy into it, the layers in between become much easier and adaptable.
Yeah. And there are
getting case studies though, isn't it? That book for that small thing.
Absolutely.
Well, even bigger than that, there are now a lot more cases of businesses that are much more open about these things, that are much better, who are doing great. Look at Silicon Valley, it's changed drastically over the past 10 years. They kind of act as a model. I won't say they're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to 15 years ago, it's a very different situation than it was. If we keep moving in that direction, it could work quite nicely.
I find this in life, you don't feel anything that you're on about in your code, then other people then own it as well. Is it like that in the software development?
Absolutely. I have found when I share with my team, they are much more willing to share with me, particularly as a leader. When I tell my team, you know what, I did this the other day, guys, and I completely screwed it up. I need your help to fix this. Would you mind giving me a hand here? The next time they screw something up, they're much more likely to come to me and say, hey, you know, that time that you screwed up, and I'm okay with that. You know, they're kind of using that against me, but that's okay because that makes them comfortable to come to me and say, you know, we've got a problem here, instead of trying to hide it. Because I remember, I was 18, 19, trying to hide things before my boss found them, and that was really not the way to go at it. I got lucky, and I had a boss who was much the same. He said, you don't need to hide this from me, we are going to deal with it. I'll go get rid of everybody, you go get on with what you need to do. And that changed things drastically for me. And if the leadership can do that a lot more, or even, it doesn't have to be team leads, just somebody who's been at the company a little bit longer and can say, actually it's okay to say this, or admit to them, I'm going to go tell the boss that I've screwed this up, it changes things, it makes it acceptable.
People in as well as with the mentorship is like when it's actually making a point to say, I don't know, let's look it up together.
Absolutely.
I think as a mentoree, you can sort of put that person on pedestal and think an art and knows everything. And that's funny when you just stop and say, hang on, I just checked that.
That's
I don't need to know and keep going again.
When I started, the higher up devs that I was talking to never told me anything like that. They always, as far as I was concerned, they were perfect. And I didn't know any better. I wasn't as good as they were, so they could spout some babble, and I was, okay, fair enough, yeah, whatever, that must be right. And that kind of led me down that path as well. I never wanted to be wrong, because they're never wrong, so I shouldn't be wrong either. Certainly somebody's going to come along behind me and say, well, I'm never wrong, you should get rid of that guy. And that didn't help me at all. It took a lot of change for me to start to be open to that. And I think that's where it starts, when other people are saying, this is okay, this is normal. Because it is. We all are going to screw things up. We can't get away without it.
I also think the whole relationship between mentor and mentoree is quite interesting. I've always found that you can always learn something from anybody else. So just because you might be more experienced or have more experience in a particular area and see this mentor doesn't actually mean the person you're mentoring can't teach you something. And actually putting that mentoree, if you want to call it that,
to be honest, I've always
been a bit really powerful.
Uncomfortable with the idea of it. Yeah. It's give it a label, and it's like.
I've done quite a lot of mentoring people, for instance, and basically been through several years of their changing their style of how to do things. And most effectively was the one where they said, just basically speak what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow you won't be here. So if you give them the answer, it's actually it's no use whatsoever. But if you actually say what it is, okay, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking I'll go and look this up, and that basically that approach, because that's just experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So all you convey is like techniques you've created over the years.
Absolutely.
And basically talking through the way you're doing it. And it takes away the magic of this, oh, you can do this answer. So basically it's like, no, you basically went through a simple process of saying, oh, I'm thinking so-and-so and so-and-so at this point, and now I'm going to go and look this up. And basically just talking it through was probably the most effective thing. And that basically left a set of skills in somebody called,
I am absolutely convinced every developer should spend a year on a help desk, because learning how to troubleshoot is...
I was a contractor in a company early in my career, where basically every person who worked on a team, it was a team of quite an advanced product, had to take on a customer. And basically they were responsible for the needs of that particular customer, even though there was only a few in the country. But basically you definitely got that feedback of actually, wow, I didn't realise that was such an impactful thing that I did there.
I think it's two-sided.
It's huge.
You get that picture, you get a full picture, because a lot of developers will go sit in a corner, they'll do what they've been told to do, but they don't understand the impact. The other side of it is you just start to learn how to communicate, how to figure out where they're at, learn what their context is, and that allows us to, I think inherently developers are problem solvers.
But also measure the decisions you've taken in the product that have obviously became part of the product. Yeah. And you think, really, I took that as such a lightweight decision, and I can see what the impact of that is. They're living with that decision for for the next year or two.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically it was huge. It basically got me thinking far more about what it is I was doing. Like since I was young stroke. So.
That was one of the first eye openers for me. Again, I was working at IBM. We were transitioning between mainframe and GUI interfaces, and the feedback that I was picking up really was eye-opening, because I was young, and I thought, ooh, cool new GUI things, that's awesome, that's more intuitive and wonderful and everything. And immediately the feedback was, no, this doesn't work anymore. We used to be able to key these things blindfolded and do 10 of them a minute, and now I can do one every 3 minutes. And getting that feedback kind of helped me start to see, okay, actually, just because I thought it was better doesn't really mean it is.
I think that overlaps with the problems of the time, or fixing a problem first. It doesn't look shiny or
yeah.
It's like you're actually blocking that person from the
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's fine, yeah. No, I'm really happy everyone's discussing here, but conscious of time. So yes, thank you very much for all coming. I think we'll probably end it about there. As I say, we're not here in September because I'll be on the beach, but in October we will be back. In the meantime, come and join us on Slack. You can find it at bit.ly/LeicesterJS-Slack. Really dead simple. And it's also on the Meetup page as well, so you should be able to find it. So yeah, until then, thank you very much, and thank you very much to Josh and also Richard. I hope you've enjoyed your first talk experience.
Yes, thank you all for putting up with me.
Thank you very much, and yeah, we'll see you all in 2 months' time. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Really thoroughly enjoyed that. Very good.
Yeah. Well, that's why we started the podcast in the first place, because I kept finding all these resources.
Right, but you listen to that and your perspective on things are I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. I think you're going to have loads of questions.
So what's happening here? I would like to have some questions. Sure. So as a get my foot into the monolith application that has now been in the business for figure it out but then how the companies work. To put it into context, this
there are a couple of big things I would say before you even start talking about it. Obviously, soak up as much as you can. Absolutely.
Intertwined.
Pick up as much as you can.
In effect,
Focus on things. One of the first things I did when I started doing job searches,
Java, finance,
I focused on the names of
retail
them.
platforms.
But at the time it was all Java, so I learned Java. Java's still popular today. It's not a bad choice.
And it's been, so it's been adapted. It's been adapted business for Boots have recognised that is, in terms of the problem is, in terms of release, new release from the
I'll tell you, when we
so we're now in a position
trying to differentiate between one and the next one, who all just have a GitHub link and nothing else. It's just it's very difficult.
Commercial experience. Figure it out. This guy doesn't work in a commercial experience.
That's where they want to go.
How do these sort of things out?
It's going to be a mix. Not agile as big it's the way it is. You will be asked stupid things, they will do stupid things. They will discount you for stuff.
So
But I like to think about it as a culture, because I don't want to work for those guys anyway.
release things more quickly.
You want to find the ones who are willing to work for those guys.
You're releasing developing isolate
They don't have any constraints. Do whatever I want. You start to see where would this person go if I made them partner.
The sort of thing is like, I did that sort of projects. I did like first stage of like telephone interviews, I don't know about myself. But later on, like they don't to me like what's going on these days. Okay, we're going to use the things.
The microservices are.
Doesn't take me to the further.
I will be honest with you. A lot of them just make data responding. I will be honest. Sometimes I don't because I just I've got 200 of them. I can't respond personally to every single one of them. I'll send a generic.
They're much more
Usually once you get to a second interview, that's a much smaller group. I will send something
that deals with everything to do with identity.
You didn't have any reason we didn't choose you, but we found another candidate. These are the things that they have.
And that, is where you can break it down to.
To be honest, as a new
And then it feels daunting sometimes.
It is, yes. I think
But not just how built. So there's sort of I wanted to know how it works out and how do I lend my the industry and
actually get personal projects lined up so that I can get to them, see them, work on their CV, get a lot of feedback. Feedback is amazing. Send it to everybody you can find. If you know anybody who's in tech, send it to them. Just ask them, please be brutal. Tell me everything that's wrong with this. If there's a pixel out of alignment, just let me know, please. Get that nailed down, because that's the first thing I want to do.
I also transitioned
bringing the estate and best of breed product is that the right capability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, whether or not to stay
and then be sure to highlight those things, because quite often I'll just get a link to GitHub and say, yeah, take a look at my GitHub, and I look at it, they've done 463 things, which one am I supposed to look at? So if you can direct them to one specific thing, I'm really proud of this, I really have felt this one. Some people need to be there to contribute code. I'm actually quite happy if somebody can say, actually, you know what, I've been dealing with the issues for this project for a while, verifying that there's actually a problem, with that, particularly for junior. To be honest, that's a lot of what I'm going to ask you to do. Part of learning and growing is going to be finding problems and say, can you verify this is a problem? Give me an idea of what things are wrong with it. If you put that in an open source project. As I said, I've been doing all the issues for this project. That's really cool. Yeah. If you do a front end, though, make sure that you have a good portfolio and all that highlighted as well, because it's another opportunity to show off this is what I do.
Ask you for so you've got a pretty good career progression.
Simply well, I don't even have a degree.
You don't really?
No. I do. Everybody thinks I do because they just assume everybody's got a degree. To be honest, I think most of them are crap. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be any good, particularly when you're starting out. They might keep you through some gatekeepers. I don't think they make you better developers. I don't think if you're sitting in front of me in an interview, I would even bat an eye at them. Whether they better or not, I wouldn't give a shit. But particularly if they're companies, if you're going to go through HR, they're going to look at things that are going to start checking off as many things as they can filter out as quickly as they can, and they will look at those things.
Yeah, I mean, most of the best programmers that I know don't
So I
university, they all started somewhere young, so they started to sort of pay around early on,
learn how to solve problems.
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
but I totally agree with you that if you take my position, you don't get into but then if you
you don't. I have never gone through any of those things. Compared with you, when I was learning Java, I went and did all the training and certifications because it was a good course. I learned a lot doing it, and that helped me get through some of the interviews as well. Because they started doing white things, always based off those tests.
I think you can pretty much get over without it.
It's all about talent and what you can do.
So this is not IP rated. Yeah, I mean, I just put my that camera. She's only 13. Yeah, so she's sort of, like look at the reviews and they say that one got highlight.
That is pretty good.
Yeah, like start off with them. Have you got any like advice on how she can get started in photography? Have you got any YouTube videos, any sites or anything? Or?
There are a ton of YouTube videos. Just tell her to have fun on YouTube. That's great thing. I will say nothing beats going out and taking pictures.
Yeah.
The other thing to do is pick up some basic composition books. To be honest, most cameras now, the auto mode, will do most of what you need to start with. So most people are really bad at taking pictures because they don't understand composition. They don't know where to put the subject. They don't even know what the subject is. So get some basic books on photography to explain what composition is. Composition is the theory behind how to take a good picture. It's also the theory behind how to paint a good picture as well. It is about putting objects in a manner that is pleasing to the human eye. So they've got some basic rules that help you get started to get really current. You never put somebody right in the middle of the picture. You put it off center because it draws the eye to that. It also starts about storytelling. You don't take a picture generally of something you take a picture of the frames. Telling the story. Any basic photography books will start to talk about those things. And those are the things that really helped me early on start to get a grasp.
I don't know
how do I take a good picture?
I know that I've been doing before
I bought my first real camera, something quite similar to that, much older, like in the year 1999, so it's been a little while now. Yeah.
And what sort of subjects interest you?
And it also
I do a lot of landscapes and I do a lot of
Like my daughter's got she's got a wood iPhone. Sometimes she's like in the garden and stuff. She's thinking
potentially just because the way the process is.
Also, you take an expensive haircut, I took an iPhone, I took a lot. It's all about the composition.
And where do you post your project?
Usually I put it up on Instagram because that's what my mom knows to look at. So that'll get us started. If she really enjoys it, she will just take tons of pictures and she'll enjoy it, and that'll be it. She'll figure it out.
I might, if she's got any questions, I might send some
Yeah,
messages Slack them. And then, you live in Leicester, or?
I do. I live up in Leicester.
Okay, it's not too far. I live here.
Okay.
So, no, I mean, after a few months, if it's into it, if you're like going to go out to the box or that, like,
Going up and go to birthday party, places like that.
yeah, but might get to like a month.
If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, yeah.
Go from there.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Just keep trying. Keep working at it. You'll get there.
First, to get the question.
Well, yeah.
No one's watching you do. And we're listening. The biggest contract to go down is to expect this. That's what opened my eyes. Makes me want to learn a bit more about what you're
But it's just things like that though is just design thinking itself is very, some people have actually rejected that because it was not, it's like
So like, you just seem to tell me something wrong.
So in each website, we'll see where the journey has gone. See where I've taken it So you guys basically build that.
Yeah, pretty much.
20-25 years. We all had isolated systems. What about the time? You all came together. And then you know, it's just the ebb and flow of, I'm sure in another 10 years somebody will buy a better design, and that's why you can see throwing it apart and saying, what happened to it? It's just not dreadful.
I just think developers, they might just see it as a bit rough around.
You've been in Leicester? I have been in Leicester for about 8 years. Okay. Yeah, it's been a while. I generally know my way around most of the time.
Yeah, but then you've been in the UK.
Yeah, I moved here in 2005. So 14 years now.
You moved at the right time.
Yeah, a little bit. It's always an absolute mess. We've always got something going on. Some natural disasters.
But I guess like it's not much better here, is it?
That's kind of
so on one side they were doing something, on the other side they were doing lead
but that's partly what
rig the elections. They were so they started off this rigged they started off
I did think about that while you were doing that. I was thinking, shit, I don't know this one. I was hoping I did right.
Last time it was in my head and it was easy for me, whereas this time I was having to like go through what I've written to jump on over.
I thought it was very good, Josh. It was very natural. I like the wee callback stuff.
Yeah, so I started my first company when I was 24. So basically, I basically did my university afterwards. So basically, I did coding. I started coding in 1974, by the way. So basically, built my first computer before I ever bought one. Because I did electronics. Very interesting. And I remember selling my own homebrew to buy a ZX81 kit so I could build that, so I could do electronics.
No, I wasn't quite that far back.
And then my ZX Spectrum, I actually built a disk interface for it. So, but I got into computer graphics. So basically, my first job from 1979 onwards, I worked in ship flight simulation. So basically, graphics for flight simulation, military flight simulation. So television picture generation. TepiGen was then called it. Television picture generation. So real-time stuff was a big thing. And then became a contractor in 1985. And then basically then started worked in the city quite quickly and did things like real-time pricing systems and things like that. So I was using my finessing of my graphic skills. So what I always did was I actually took my knowledge and finessed it to create the next piece of knowledge. So I remember going on my first contracts, like 1985, landed at a company, Emerson, were Fishers at the time here. They had 2 Macs. So basically, I'd already come across graphics workstations in university because we actually did a ship simulator for Cardiff Technology as one I go to, teaching pilots to super tankers, drive super tankers. And so I come across this workstation and they were using it for and I'd already written a research paper for how to generate them cool, we were using plot to digitise it. And I was like, right, this is the thing I need to do. And basically that's the first job. I know the graphics workstations, the first thing I need to do is graphics. So I took my graphics
I wouldn't buy that unless I had a
my one, if I plug anything, if I